The fluorescent lights of the Portland courthouse hummed overhead as Margaret Chen sat rigid in her chair, her hands folded precisely in her lap. 23 years of marriage, reduced to a Tuesday afternoon hearing in Judge Patricia Holloway's courtroom. Margaret had dressed carefully that morning, a navy blazer over a cream blouse, her silver necklace catching the light. She wanted to look composed, even as her world crumbled. Across the aisle sat her husband, David Chen, a prominent architect whose modern designs dotted the city skyline. But it wasn't his presence that made Margaret's stomach turn. It was the woman beside him, Vanessa Rothschild, a young real estate developer with cascading blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Vanessa sat, with her hand proprietarily on David's arm, whispering something that made him chuckle softly. Margaret's lawyer, an older woman named Rita Blackwood, leaned over. "Are you sure you want to proceed without contesting? You're entitled to much more than what he's offering." Margaret shook her head. "I just want this over." That was what she'd been saying for weeks, ever since David had handed her the divorce papers over breakfast, Vanessa waiting in his car outside their home. The humiliation had been exquisite. Her husband so eager to move forward with his affair that he couldn't even wait to deliver the papers privately. Judge Holloway entered, and everyone rose. She was a stern woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. As she reviewed the documents, her expression grew increasingly tight. "Mr. Chen," she said, looking up, "I see you're requesting a division of assets that gives you 70% of the marital property, including the family home where your wife currently resides. On what grounds?" David stood, his expensive suit impeccable. "Your Honor, I've been the primary earner throughout our marriage. My architectural firm generates significant income, and I believe the division reflects my contributions." "And Mrs. Chen's contributions?" Judge Holloway asked coolly. "She didn't work," Vanessa interjected, then colored when everyone turned to look at her. "I mean, she was a homemaker." Judge Holloway's gaze could have frozen molten steel. "I don't recall addressing you, Ms. Rothschild." "Vanessa Rothschild. I'm here for support." "I see." The judge turned back to Margaret. "Mrs. Chen, is it true you didn't work outside the home?" Margaret spoke quietly. "I stopped working as a civil engineer when our daughter Emma was born. David wanted someone to manage the household and support his career. I organized his business dinners, hosted clients, managed our properties. I also volunteered extensively. I spent 15 years running the youth mentorship program at the community center." "And your daughter?" "She's 20 now. Studying medicine at Johns Hopkins." Judge Holloway made several notes. "Mr. Chen, I'm inclined to reject this proposed settlement. It seems grossly inequitable given Mrs. Chen's contributions to." "Your Honor," David interrupted, "with all due respect, Margaret agreed to these terms. She signed the papers." "Because you ambushed her," Rita Blackwood interjected. "My client was emotionally distraught when." "Your Honor, may I speak?" Margaret's voice cut through the argument. Everyone fell silent. She stood, her composure perfect. "I'd like to accept the terms as written." Rita looked at her in shock. "Margaret, I accept them completely. All I ask is one addition. I'd like the court to include a clause stating that Mr. Chen and Ms. Rothschild must remain in a committed relationship for at least 3 years following this divorce. If they separate before then, the asset division reverts to a standard 50-50 split." The courtroom went utterly still. David's face drained of color. Vanessa's mouth fell open. "What?" David sputtered. That's ridiculous." "You can't." "Why not?" Margaret asked calmly. "You've told me repeatedly that Vanessa is your soulmate. That you've found true love. Surely 3 years is a small commitment compared to the 23 you made to me. Unless. She paused delicately. Unless you have doubts about the relationship's longevity. Vanessa's grip on David's arm had turned white-knuckled. She leaned in, whispering urgently. David's jaw worked silently. Judge Holloway leaned forward, her expression unreadable, but her eyes gleaming with something that might have been approval. Mrs. Chen, this is a highly unusual request. I'm aware, Your Honor. But if Mr. Chen truly believes his new relationship justifies the dissolution of our marriage and the forfeiture of my rights to our shared assets, then surely he's confident enough to make a small commitment. It's merely a formality, after all. The silence stretched. David looked at Vanessa, who had gone pale. Her whisper was audible in the quiet courtroom, 3 years. David, we haven't even talked about moving in together, you haven't? Margaret asked innocently. How strange. David gave up our home for you. Our marriage. His daughter's respect. Surely you've discussed your future. This is manipulation. David burst out. Your Honor, she's trying to. I'm trying to ensure that the sacrifice of my marriage meant something, Margaret said softly. If you love Vanessa enough to destroy our family, prove it. 3 years isn't long. Unless she's just a passing fancy. She looked directly at Vanessa. Or unless you're having second thoughts, Ms. Rothschild, now that the excitement of the affair is facing the reality of commitment. Vanessa stood abruptly. I need some air. She walked out, her heels clicking on the tile floor. David started after her, then stopped, looking torn. Judge Holloway watched this with an expression that suggested she'd seen this play many times before. Mr. Chen, do you wish to accept your wife's proposed modification, or would you prefer to renegotiate the entire settlement? David's face was a battlefield of emotions, pride, anger, fear, and dawning realization. I need to speak with Ms. Rothschild. Take 15 minutes, Judge Holloway said. But Mr. Chen, I suggest you think very carefully about what you truly want. And perhaps reflect on the vows you made 23 years ago, for better or worse, which apparently meant nothing when something better came along. During the recess, Margaret stepped outside. Her daughter Emma was waiting on a bench, having driven down from Baltimore. The young woman stood and embraced her mother. How'd it go? Emma asked. We'll see, Margaret said. She had dark circles under her eyes, nights of crying, of questioning her worth, of wondering where she'd failed. But today, she felt something else. Clarity. I don't understand why you'd accept such a terrible deal in the first place, Emma said, her voice breaking. Dad's been awful. He doesn't deserve, sweetheart, watch. Margaret nodded toward the courthouse entrance, where David and Vanessa were having an intense conversation. Vanessa's arms were crossed, her body language defensive. David was gesturing, pleading. 3 years is nothing if you love someone, Emma murmured, understanding dawning. But if you're just caught up in an affair. Exactly. Your father fell in love with the excitement, the novelty. Vanessa fell for a successful married man, the thrill of stealing someone, of being chosen. But real love? The kind that survives mortgages and sick children and boring Tuesdays. They haven't tested that. Emma shook her head. He's going to lose everything either way. If he accepts your clause, they'll probably break up under the pressure. If he rejects it, the judge will give you a fair settlement. Yes, Margaret said simply. When they returned to the courtroom, David looked haggard. Vanessa wasn't with him. Your Honor, he said, his voice hoarse. I'd like to withdraw the current settlement, and renegotiate terms. Judge Holloway nodded slowly. I thought you might. Mrs. Chen, are you amenable to negotiation? Of course, Your Honor, Margaret said graciously. I've always been reasonable. Over the next hour, with Judge Holloway's firm guidance, they worked out a new settlement, 50-50 split of assets, fair support payments, and Margaret keeping the family home until she chose to sell. David agreed to everything with minimal protest. The fight had gone out of him. As they signed the final documents, Judge Holloway addressed them both. Mr. Chen, Mrs. Chen, I've presided over hundreds of divorces. I've seen many situations like yours, Mr. Chen, where someone mistakes infatuation for love and abandons their commitments. The grass often seems greener, especially when you haven't had to mow it yet. Ms. Rothschild's absence today speaks volumes about the foundation of your new relationship. She turned to Margaret. Mrs. Chen, you conducted yourself with remarkable dignity. You could have fought bitterly, but instead you offered your husband a choice: commit to his decision or recognize it for what it truly was. That took courage and wisdom. As they left the courthouse, Emma walked beside her mother. Mom, where did that idea come from? The 3-year clause. Margaret smiled, her first genuine smile in months. Your grandfather told me something when I was young. He said, if someone is willing to abandon their promises to you, make them prove their promises to themselves. Your father couldn't do it. When forced to commit publicly to Vanessa, to make it real and lasting, he realized what he was giving up. Do you think he regrets it? I think he will, Margaret said. But that's not my concern anymore. I spent 23 years making his life comfortable, raising you, supporting his dreams. Now it's time for my dreams. What will you do? Margaret looked up at the clear Portland sky. I've been accepted to a graduate program in urban planning. I'm going to design community spaces, places that bring people together, that last. Not glass towers, but parks and community centers. Things that matter. That's amazing, Mom. And Margaret added with a slight smile, I heard from James Thornton last week. Remember him? He was my lab partner in engineering school. He's widowed now, teaches at Portland State. He asked if I'd like to get coffee sometime. Emma laughed. Mom. That's wonderful. It's just coffee, Margaret cautioned. But her eyes were brighter than they'd been in months. Behind them, through the courthouse windows, David sat alone on a bench, his phone dark beside him. Vanessa had stopped answering his calls that afternoon. The condo they'd looked at together suddenly seemed empty and cold in his imagination. His daughter wouldn't speak to him. His wife, ex-wife, was moving forward with grace he'd never appreciated. He'd designed buildings meant to inspire awe, but he'd never built anything that lasted where it truly mattered. And now, surrounded by the monuments to his professional success, he realized they were hollow victories compared to what he'd lost. Judge Holloway, watching from her chamber's window, shook her head. Another man who'd learned the difference between love and illusion too late. But at least Mrs. Chen had walked away with her dignity and her future intact. That was something. As Margaret and Emma drove away, Margaret rolled down the window, letting the spring air wash over her face. 23 years had ended, yes. But maybe, just maybe, the next chapter would be written by her alone, on her terms, with someone who truly understood the meaning of commitment. The divorce was final. The regret was just beginning, but only for those who'd earned it. Hello everyone. If you are enjoying this video and finding it helpful, don't forget to support our channel. Please subscribe to our channel, press the like button, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos. We regularly upload amazing, informative, and entertaining content just for you. Your support means a lot to us and motivates us to bring even better content in the future. Thank you so much for watching. and welcome to our growing community.